Okay, great. Thanks, everybody. If you've just joined, welcome. Um, Victoria, whenever you're ready, I just wanted to
Perfect.
mention that I'm calling in from the lands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples. If you want to share where you are, I'm actually over boundary. I'm not in Burnaby proper, but yeah, tell us where you're coming from and take it away.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm actually calling from the Stolo Nation. So I'm over in Abbotsford, but don't worry, everyone. I'm safe where I'm located and happy to be here today to present to you all. And yeah, I'll go ahead and get started. I know we're not running too badly behind, but I am quite the chatty Cathy. So I'll go ahead and get started here. So thank you everyone for attending. So my presentation today is Dementia Friends with the Alzheimer's Society of BC. So this is quite a high level presentation. And I do just want to acknowledge that likely we may have some people here who are either experiencing dementia themselves or may be a care partner to an individual living with dementia, or it may be people who are just wanting to know more about dementia and may not have any personal or professional affiliation with dementia. And so I just want to acknowledge that if you are an individual living with dementia or a care partner, that there may be some information that's mentioned today that could be a little bit sensitive to you. And so if you do need kind of have further questions than what we are presenting here today, or if you feel that you need to speak to someone further from some of the information provided, I would welcome you to call our First Link Dementia Helpline. And that telephone number is 1-800-936 6033, and that's available Monday to Friday from 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. And I'll make sure that our last slide does have that information as well. So I know that I threw that number out there very quickly, but that information will be in the presentation later on as well. So as you can see me here, apparently I also want to make sure that you have another opportunity to see me. So again, I am a support and education coordinator with the First Link program. As we're moving into the bulk of the information and content for this presentation, I am actually just going to turn off my video, even though we've been doing virtual presentations for almost 2 years now. I still haven't mastered not making funny faces or gesticulating with my hands quite frequently. And I know that that can be a little bit distracting, and I really want people to have the opportunity to focus on the content of this presentation, because we do have quite a bit of information that I'm hoping to get through in these 40 minutes. So I will go ahead and turn off my video now, and hopefully everyone can still hear me okay, and we'll get into what everyone is here for, the content of the presentation. So in today's presentation, we're hoping that you'll walk away with what is a dementia-friendly community, what a dementia friend is, what dementia is, including myths about dementia. We're hoping that you'll have the opportunity to maybe recognize that someone might be living with dementia. We'll briefly touch upon some communication strategies and how to communicate with an individual living with dementia in an effective and appropriate way. And again, we'll also briefly touch upon where you can go for more help. So as some of you may or may not know, there are an estimated 70,000 people living with dementia in BC. And we know that about 60% of those people living with dementia actually live in the community. And so, before we kind of get started here about what a dementia-friendly community is, I would invite you to type in your chat box, if you feel comfortable, some thoughts that you may have about what makes a community dementia friendly. And then Melissa, if we start to get some responses, if you don't mind letting me know what people may be responding with for what they think makes a community dementia friendly.
Yeah, I'll keep an eye on the chat and let you know.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So I'll go ahead then and just mention that the Society's vision, the Alzheimer's Society of BC, of course, our vision is to have dementia-friendly communities across BC that is supportive of people living with dementia by bolstering the efforts of local communities. And so a dementia-friendly community really, when you think about it, it just kind of is supportive, inclusive, and accessible for people with dementia as well as their caregivers. So I guess, dementia friendly really is just that opportunity for individuals living with dementia and their care partners to have access to the support and information they need where they are in their journey. So, for instance, it's a community that focuses on stigma reduction and again, that inclusion of people living with dementia. In a dementia friendly community, people living with dementia feel supported by individuals, businesses, local governments, and they're able to participate in their communities to the fullest extent possible. Dementia-friendly communities are defined by both their social characteristics. So, for example, community members are dementia educated. They're able to recognize and communicate effectively with a person dementia, as well as their physical characteristics. So that may include clear and legible signage, making sure that that signage is placed at eye level, well-kept streets, and easy to use street furniture in styles familiar to people. So dementia friends are a key part of working towards more dementia-friendly social environments. And a dementia friend is also a person who is understanding and inclusive of people living with dementia and is ideally a community member, again, are educated about dementia and know that a person living with dementia may sometimes experience the world quite differently than we do. And I just want to acknowledge that by everyone being present here today and learning more about dementia, you're helping with that mission and becoming a dementia friend. So gold stars for everyone in attendance here today. And thank you so much for your participation. So this quote is actually by Jim Mann. So Jim Mann is a former board member for both the Alzheimer's Society of BC and the Alzheimer's Society of Canada. Jim is actually also a person living with dementia and is a passionate advocate for people living with dementia. So as you can see on the screen, the quote here reads, "The dementia-friendly communities program will help create inviting and supportive communities where people like me who are living with dementia in the community can feel comfortable and safe walking, shopping, and just getting around." And for those of us who may not have cognitive concerns, we may not understand the impacts that dementia can have on some of those day-to-day activities that we do. And so by being more informed, we can be more inclusive and provide that support. Unfortunately, due to the time constraints today, we don't have time to play Jim Mann's video, but I would strongly encourage you to look it up for yourself. It's about 7 minutes long, and it's a really powerful look at Jim's experience living with dementia and what a dementia-friendly community means for him. So you can find it easily by typing alzbc.org/Jim's story into your browser, and you should be able to access that from our website. So we've already talked a little bit about what a dementia-friendly community is, and that dementia friends are part of that dementia-friendly community. So a dementia friend, as I kind of mentioned a bit earlier, is a person who is understanding and inclusive of people living with dementia. And to put it another way, the qualities of a dementia friend are that they're respectful towards people living with dementia. They make a person living with dementia feel accepted. They focus on the person's strengths and abilities and offers assistance when needed rather than doing nothing. So, just to kind of put that in a little bit bit more of a applicable context, I have a bit of an example of a dementia-friendly interaction that a person shared in one of our early stage support groups. So this participant had shared that she was grocery shopping one day and that it was quite a busy day for her and she was in a hurry trying to get everything done and get home in time to meet her grandchildren after work. She suddenly found that in that stressful moment, as I'm sure we can all put ourselves in that shoes of having a really busy day and running around and trying to get things done quickly, she found that when it was her turn at the checkout counter, just like the experience that Jim has had in his video, she suddenly found that in that stressful moment, she didn't know how to pay for her groceries. The line behind her was long and impatient, and she immediately felt panicky. However, the checkout person was calm and patient, focused on her completely, and helped to calmly walk her through the options for paying, and in fact, actually helped her to count out the money she needed to pay. So by the time our group member left that grocery store, she was calm and she was happy, and she was incredibly grateful for the gift that that cashier had given her. And so that may seem like a very small interaction to some of us, but just those moments of kindness can really make the difference for an individual living with dementia, especially in some of those stressful circumstances. So, of course, now that we've been talking about dementia and dementia-friendly communities and dementia friends, what is dementia? So there are actually many types of dementia. So dementia is more of like an umbrella term that for any disease that causes physical changes in the brain, while Alzheimer's disease is actually a type of dementia. So to kind of put that in context, you can kind of think like dementia is kind of like the word dog. So, you have many types of different dogs. You could have a Pomeranian, you could have a Dalmatian, you could have a golden retriever. And so as you have those many types of dementia, such as Alzheimer's disease, vascular dementia, and Lewy body dementia, those would be more like the types of dogs that people may own. So again, we see a couple of different dementias here on the screen. And so some people may have Alzheimer's disease, they may have a Lewy body dementia, they could have a vascular dementia, a frontotemporal dementia. I'm not going to get into any great detail today on those different types of dementia. It's just important to note that there are different types, and that may have a different kind of onset or progression or symptoms that may be experienced. And even though we're called the Alzheimer's Society of BC, we do provide support to individuals with all types of dementia, as well as their care partners as well. There's also something called mixed dementia, and this may be when a person has more than one kind of dementia. So they may have Alzheimer's disease with Lewy body dementia. So dementia causes physical changes to the brain, and these causes changes in behavior, personality, and judgment, of course, as well, short-term memory loss as well. And different dementias cause different changes in the brain, and dementia affects each person differently. If you've ever attended a presentation that the Alzheimer's Society has given previously, this quote may be familiar to you, but we often say, if you know one person with dementia, you know one person with dementia. So even though there are many similarities across the dementia and the disease process, there's also many differences as well. It's important to note that dementia is not a normal part of aging. And so even though dementia is typically related with age, and the number one risk factor for developing a dementia is older age, it's not a normal part of aging, and not every person who gets older is going to develop a dementia. There's also normal age-related changes. And so if you occasionally forget a person's name or the word you're looking for or where you've put your keys, that is likely a normal part of aging. It's when it's happening consistently and more progressively, and it's starting to impact the quality of your day-to-day life, where we may suspect that maybe a dementia may be present and further testing may be required. It's also important to note that dementia is progressive and it's non-reversible, meaning it will get worse over time and it is eventually a life-limiting illness. There are some medications that can help to manage the symptoms, but they don't work forever and they won't work for everyone. And unfortunately, there is currently no cure for dementia. So one of the key things that many people do not realize about the disease that we call dementia is that most of them cause physical changes to the brain, which in turn cause changes in behavior, personality, and judgment. Again, different dementias can cause different changes. And so, for example, in the slide you are seeing, we are looking at a comparison between a healthy brain on the left-hand side and the brain of a similar sized and aged person with advanced Alzheimer's disease on the right. Because these changes are happening inside of a person's head, we cannot see them happening. Alzheimer's disease causes significant shrinkage of the brain, and those physiological changes can cause breaks in memory, disruption of any of the physical senses, and disorder in the actual processes of thought themselves. So many individuals living with dementia may not be able to retain new information because of the changes that are occurring in their brain. We absolutely cannot expect the right side of the brain to function as the left side does. And yet, because often people living with dementia look fine on the outside, they may experience that exact thing, that the people around them do not take into account those physical changes and modify how they're responding in order to support that individual. So even though it may be difficult, we have to ask ourselves, who can change in this scenario? The person living with dementia or us? And the answer to that, of course, is us. So therefore, it's on us to adapt to meet the needs of the person living with dementia. So Melissa, I'll call upon you again, if you don't mind, to monitor the chat. And I just want to ask people as we go through, what are some things that you may have heard about dementia that you think might not be true, or maybe some myths that you've heard that you're not certain if they're true or not. So if people feel comfortable, I invite you to share in the chat box what might not be true about dementia. And I will give it a second here for people to respond. And if we don't get any responses, then I'll go ahead and just give you the answers. Okay, so some of the myths you may have heard about dementia is that dementia is not strictly a genetic disorder. So for most people, Alzheimer's disease is not just about genetics. So there's actually two kinds of Alzheimer's disease. One's called familial and one's called sporadic. So sporadic means that it could happen to anyone and accounts for about 95% of Alzheimer's disease. And then the other 5% of Alzheimer's disease is familial, which means that there is a strong genetic link. However, people with sporadic Alzheimer's disease can inherit genes that increase their likelihood of developing the disease. As I mentioned earlier, we often hear that Alzheimer's disease is something that only impacts older adults. And while, again, age is the #1 risk factor, it's not just people who affect older adults. There are thousands of people in BC who have dementia that are under the age of 65. Again, dementia is not a normal part of aging, and dementia is not preventable. So there are things we can do that we call risk reduction. So some examples of risk reduction may be exercise, getting enough sleep, learning a new language, playing word games, eating a nutritious diet, staying hydrated, maintaining a social life. The list kind of goes on. Overall health contributes to overall brain health, certainly. But again, there's nothing we can do to prevent dementia. People can do all of these things and still develop dementia, and people can do none of these things and still develop dementia. Again, dementia is not curable. And at this time, research doesn't support the hypothesis that aluminum can cause dementia or Alzheimer's disease, which is sometimes a myth that we hear. Dementia also does not mean an end of a meaningful life. So, for example, a man living with dementia's passion has always been gardening. So, early in the disease, he was able to continue gardening on his own. But then, as the disease progressed, he knew that he required more assistance. So, a family member, a friend, maybe even a neighbor was able to help so that he could still take part in his passion of gardening. So, it's not to say that individuals living with dementia, once they receive that diagnosis or are progressing in their journey, aren't able to do things. They may not be able to do them exactly the same way as they did once before, but we like to adapt those things that are important to them in order to support them along the journey. It also does not mean that a person cannot understand what is going on around them. So sometimes individuals with dementia do need a little bit more time to respond, and that can kind of cause confusion that that person doesn't understand what's happening. And that may be the case in certain instances, but for the majority of those times, you may just need to rephrase something, or they just need a little bit more time to respond. Again, dementia does not mean that that individual is going to become violent. It's important to remember that changes to their brain may make it challenging for the person living with dementia to respond appropriately, and that sometimes could feel maybe like aggressive behavior. But this behavior is often the result of the person living with dementia either having a different reality than what we experience, or being frustrated that they have difficulty performing a familiar task or finding the right word. So referring to behavior resulting from frustrations as reactive or responsive reflects understanding of the reality of the person living with dementia, and that that behavior may be responding to something if we can identify that or not. So, a common question we receive is, how might you know someone is living with dementia? And this is certainly not a clinical evaluation. If you do suspect that someone you know, or even yourself, is living with dementia or may have dementia, again, please call our helpline. We can give you more information. And typically that is a conversation that you would have with your family doctor, and then potentially be referred further for further testing. But this is just some signs of dementia you may see that can make it helpful for people to know when they might want to have that further discussion when they're with their doctor. So again, this is not a complete diagnostic list. This is just things that they may be experiencing. So of course, memory loss that affects day-to-day function. They may have difficulty performing familiar tasks. So again, we're all busy. We can get distracted from time to time. So we may leave the carrots on the stove, or, only remember to serve them at the end of a meal. But a person living with dementia may have trouble with tasks that have been familiar to them all of their lives, such as preparing a meal or knowing how to cook carrots. People with dementia may have difficulty with language and finding the right words. So again, everyone has difficulty finding the right words sometimes, but a person living with dementia may forget simple words or they may substitute words, and that can sometimes make the sentence difficult to understand. Or sometimes as well, you may find that they talk around the word. So they may want to say chair and they may say, oh, I want to sit in that thing over there. It's there by that table, and they might be able to say table, but they may not be able to say chair. So you might find that they kind of talk around things. There can also be problems with abstract thinking. So a person living with dementia may have difficulty with tasks that require abstract thinking. So that normally is kind of making sense of symbols or images or understanding metaphors. So, you may say to someone, oh, I was really, up the creek without a paddle. And the individual living with dementia may respond, oh, where were you, canoeing? They won't understand that reference or that kind of colloquial language that you may commonly use and they may have used previously as well. Again, an individual living with dementia may have challenges following conversation. So an individual with dementia typically may seem like they're a step behind in the conversation, or they may reply in an inappropriate way. And so what we mean by that is that you may ask them a question and they may respond with an answer that has nothing to do with the question that's being asked of them. You may also see with an individual living with dementia that they have poor or decreased judgment. And so again, this may look like, especially if we're just a good Samaritan on the street, you may see someone wearing a heavy winter coat in the middle of summer. So obviously right away, we know something likely probably isn't quite right there. And so that kind of poor decision making is something that you may see with an individual living with dementia, or they may have difficulty determining what to keep and what to throw out, which results in their space becoming cluttered. They also may experience disorientation of time and place. So again, it's completely normal for all of us to forget the day of the week or our destination for a moment. But a person living with dementia can become lost in a familiar place. That could even be their building or complex. And if there are similar doors in their building, they may also knock on the wrong door or mistake someone else's home with theirs. So if you do ever encounter someone who may look confused in that regard, we encourage other residents just to be patient or suggest the person living with dementia put a familiar sign or object on their door to help with that kind of disorientation. So wandering, we actually prefer the term disorientation or going missing because, again, typically individuals living with dementia are not just kind of aimlessly wandering, as this term kind of indicates, but they have a reason for why they're leaving the home or going to the location that they're trying to get to. We just may not know it. But wandering is kind of the common term that we hear associated with this variety of behaviors with a person living with dementia when they become lost. So wandering is a common behavior that we do see with individuals living with dementia, and this often leads to stress as well as safety concerns. So wandering is a direct result of physical changes in the brain, which cause a person living with dementia to become confused and disoriented, even when they're in a familiar place. And about 60% of people living with dementia are likely to wander at some point, or about 3 out of 5 individuals. So again, wandering can happen for a number of reasons, and figuring out why a person living with dementia can be difficult, but some common reasons could be that the person may be agitated due to medication side effects. They could become overwhelmed with too much noise or other forms of overstimulation. They may believe that they need to leave their house in order to go to work or take care of their children. They may not recognize that their own home is actually their home and may want to go somewhere that is more familiar. They may not recognize their own home, or it could be that they like to go for a walk, and so they may get kind of disoriented on that walk and not recognize those familiar landmarks that we typically see. So again, there's quite a few reasons why wandering may occur. When someone living with dementia goes missing, it is an emergency. We do have information and kind of a step-by-step process of what to do before and after and during a missing event. So again, I would encourage you to connect with us if you would like that information or have more questions about wandering. But if someone does go missing, again, it is an emergency. So we encourage you to call 911 immediately. So, probably one of the major reasons we're all here is we're asking ourselves, either we see these symptoms in ourselves, we see these symptoms in someone close to us, or maybe we just, again, want to be a good community member and know kind of what we can do to help. So you may be interacting with someone living with dementia for many reasons, and everyone has a role to play in contributing to a dementia-friendly community. Ensuring that you and those around you know how to recognize dementia and communicate appropriately is key to understanding a society that is supportive and inclusive of people living with dementia. So we do have some communication strategies that may be helpful for individuals when they are communicating with individuals living with dementia. So first and foremost, it's really important to get the person's attention. So again, individuals living with dementia often may have a short attention span or have difficulty focusing on a particular conversation or a particular person. So it's always important to get that person's attention so that we know that hopefully the information we're providing to them is going to be supportive and something that they can interpret. Similarly, it's really important to make eye contact. So again, an individual living with dementia may not be able to completely understand the words that you're using, but sometimes they can understand from nonverbal cues. So making eye contact so that they know that you're speaking with them is really important. Again, individuals living with dementia can become quite overwhelmed. And so if at all possible, it may be helpful to bring that person to a quiet place so there's not so many distractions in the background and they can better focus on what you're saying and you can be more supportive to them in the information that you're trying to give to them or receive from them. As I have not been doing today, since I have been speaking quite quickly, trying to get through this information for you all. But if I were speaking with an individual living with dementia and not doing a presentation, absolutely the speed and the tone of voice that I'm using would not be appropriate for that person. So when speaking with an individual with dementia, it is important to speak slowly and clearly. It's also important, though, not to speak so slowly and so clear and that they feel that we are being condescending or doing something that sometimes we hear as elder speak. So slow and clear, but not so slow that it feels uncomfortable for everyone. Again, individuals living with dementia have difficulty retaining a lot of information. And so if at all possible, it's important to share one message at a time so that they're able to understand that before we move forward. So, as simple as you can make it is always the best route when supporting an individual living with dementia. Sometimes as well, they may not be able to even respond to an open-ended question, depending where they are in their progression. And so sometimes it can be helpful to use a closed-ended question where you get a yes or a no. So, you may say to someone, "Oh, what do you want for dinner?" and they may not be able to respond to that. So using your knowledge of that person, you could say to them, do you want chicken or do you want beef for dinner tonight? And then that gives them an opportunity to select one or the other. Or if even that is too complicated, you could say, would you like chicken for dinner tonight? And they can say yes or no in response. Again, an individual living with dementia may have a slower response time, and sometimes it can feel like they are a step behind in the conversation. So it is important to allow for time to respond, and not just kind of jump in right away. It also is because of the way that our brain is working with dementia, we can have good moments and bad moments. We can have clearer times of the day and times of the day that are more challenging. Again, that can look differently for everyone, but typically in the morning, individuals with dementia feel a little bit more clear, and towards the end of the day, they may have a little bit more challenge. But again, that looks different for everyone. So if you're trying to communicate something and it's just not happening and you're frustrated and that person is frustrated, we just recommend that you repeat it, or rephrase it in a more simple way. Or it may be best, if it's not urgent, just to try it again later. It's also important to, again, because an individual living with dementia kind of lives in a different reality than what we do, on occasion. So they may tell you something that is completely not factual. And so rather than kind of responding to the story or what it is that you're telling that they're telling you, it may be helpful just to respond to the feeling. So, oh, that it sounds like you were really upset when that happened, rather than, correcting them on, no, what made you upset didn't occur. So kind of further to that, what we like to say is connect and don't correct. So if it's not harming them and it's not harming anyone else, at the end of the day, what do we care if they say that they've gone to Mexico and they've never been to Mexico before? A way to kind of connect over that would be to say, oh, it sounds like you really enjoyed travel. Can you tell me about some other places you've visited? And that can, bridge that gap and make them feel important and included in those conversations. So again, I apologize for how quickly I went through all of that information, but we really wanted to give you some kind of applicable strategies to use, as well as some more information about dementia. And as I said, if you do have any further questions or concerns, it's really important for you to hopefully be able to connect with us. So here at the Alzheimer's Society of BC, we have a variety of different supports. So we have one-on-one support where we have ongoing support calls. We have something called our Minds in Motion program, which is an hour of physical activity and an hour of mentally stimulating activity for individuals living with dementia and their care partners. We have education workshops. So similar to today's presentation, we do have webinars that are available on our website, as well as we've just started to go back to in-person education workshops. And there's also ways that you can keep up to date with all of that information through bulletins or our website. So again, I'm just going to put up here the First Link Dementia Helpline. So again, if you do have, unfortunately, I don't have any time for questions here today, but if anything I touched upon, you wanted further clarification, or you wanted more information on, or if there's anything that you're contending with that you just need a little bit more support, again, please call our Dementia Helpline at 1-800-936-6033. And we also have helplines that have support in Cantonese or Mandarin speaking, as well as Punjabi and a little bit of Hindi as well. And of course, if you do have any other language requirements, please give us a call and we can see what we can do in that regard.